Hi, hello everybody. Welcome to this Cloud Academy webinar where we are interviewing a very esteemed colleague of ours, Greg Cockburn from Bulletproof Networks. Greg is an AWS leader. He's got over 15 years experience in the information technology space, and I think most impressively of all, holds all 5 of the AWS certifications. Quite an achievement. So Greg's here to walk us through some of the processes and I suppose challenges he went through in getting to that level. So Greg, I'm hoping you're on the call. Perhaps you'd just like to give us a bit of a background on yourself.
Hey guys, thanks Andrew. Yeah. So I think I've been interested in technology since I could probably before I walk actually. So it was kind of a natural progression from there. Various into STEM during school, and then went on to do electronics engineering at university to start off with, and then pivoted to do computer science. Not long after that, I got a job as a sysadmin in a little shop in Wellington, New Zealand. Spent a few years there and then got offered a job in Australia, so flew over to Australia. So now I reside in Sydney, Australia. And kind of then spent the next, I guess, 8 odd years kind of as a sysadmin, learning the skills of the trade and honing those skills. And that was mostly, around the racking of servers and then operating system configuration and kind of deploying the applications in production, and a lot of the time that was very in-house Java applications. That was both in kind of the startup world and in the enterprise world. And then this kind of idea, I guess, of virtualization, started with VMware, and then Zen came along, which was a very kind of key piece when it was open source. And Puppet. So we were able to, get lots of development environments up and running on Zen because it was now kind of free as opposed to VMware. And we had configuration management, right? So we had all of these VMs we needed to manage. And so Puppet was the thing that was popular at the time, and CF Engine was too hard. So Puppet was the kind of the easy one to understand. So that was kind of the progression into, I guess, what's now termed, quote unquote, DevOps for myself, in that once you started to have to write beyond, bash scripts and basic Perl scripts into kind of a DSL language, and then, Puppet didn't support this or didn't support that. So it was like you had to start to pick up Ruby because you would have to write items in Puppet and Ruby. And then that natural progression from those virtual machines to what we call cloud today, into VPSs, and then ultimately into EC2. And it's that kind of mentality of not being afraid and thinking outside the square, I guess, is where we got to today, yeah.
Well, that's quite an interesting journey, and I think what's interesting most of all is that you did have quite a technical background to start with, and I assume you found it quite easy to get interested in these new technologies. But having 5 certs is pretty incredible. I mean, did you plan it that way, or did it just sort of come about of its own accord?
Yeah, good question. I guess it's kind of a multi-factor thing there. I guess the first thing is that I'll go back and say that I've never been a massive proponent of certifications. It's more been around that if a person can show ability to learn, then the certifications ultimately aren't necessary. They're a good way. It's like think about a degree at university. You go to university to ultimately learn how to learn, and an early employer, the foresight to see that, okay, this is a person who is able to learn and has shown that they can do that learning. So I think the certifications specifically for AWS started off with in Bulletproof as a requirement to be a premier partner, and then it was like, and then it kind of grew to be a competition almost. It was a competition between many of us and a few other colleagues outside of Bulletproof as to who could get there first, and I didn't win. And then it was also as the requirements for the certifications went up to as we needed to get more competencies with AWS, then we needed more certificates, and so it was like, okay, so we've got to get more. And it was also a little bit of self-interest. You kind of deal with I guess the run-of-the-mill stuff, if you like, the EC2 instances, the RDSs, and then you forget about that. There's other things outside of that, and so the certifications kind of gave you the opportunity to go back and learn the things that you don't touch often or you haven't had a chance to use or play with. And so through that journey, it was kind of like I'd used AWS for quite a number of years up to that point, and then it was like, okay, so I'm going to do this certification. And I think when I did the first one, there wasn't a lot of courses on the markets. Oh, you guys dropped up there? You back, Andrew?
Yeah, we're here. Carry on.
Okay, cool. Sorry. So the course dropped off. So doing the certifications. Sorry. And I've kind of found that when I went through the requirements for the associate ones, because there were no professional back then, it was like, oh, I haven't used that. And there weren't a lot of courses, and I think I got actually onto Cloud Academy, funnily enough, a long time ago, like couple of years ago now, and it was free. And I think I even got offered a free for the first year account from whoever, I can't remember his name, whoever was behind Cloud Academy. And so that's kind of where I picked up and learned and did the labs, and I think AWS's quick labs as well to fill in some of those gaps. But the key thing in there was to get on and ultimately use the services, right? And the certifications kind of gives you that, I know at least these kind of specific core services, and I'm able to learn them, So that kind of gives you that shows, a potential employer or, in our case with Bulletproof, potential customers that we've got, at least this good standard level of understanding of these services.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, isn't it? That for business customers and partners, it is just a way of being able to ascertain, that you are at that level. So it's a really good start point, isn't it? And it's interesting that was kind of put in front of you, and obviously you just picked it up with relish and thought, well, I can do one, so why don't I do the lot? That's that sort of technical curiosity that I think a lot of us have, and it's what in the end of the day results in such amazing achievements. Did you find a sort of a path? Did you say, okay, I'm going to do this one first, or were you just sort of dropped with one certification for the business and then you found yourself browsing whatever you want to do next?
Yeah, so the professional certifications didn't even exist, and I think when I started doing them, the SIS Ops associate didn't exist either. Honestly, it's actually a little too while ago to ultimately remember, but yeah. So there was I'd be honest, I was a little bit afraid to go and do the first one, and I kind of waited until a colleague had done it and see what score he got, and I think he actually failed the first time, and then it was like, okay, so I've got to go and do this and pass the first time. So I really sat down and nutted go through the blueprint and like, okay, I need to know this, 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 and really went through all of those things and did all the little labs I could find and went through all at the time whatever was on Cloud Academy. It was pretty early days in that then, and kind of went through all the services and I went back through and read all the white papers that it suggested to you to do and I went in. I don't remember the score, but I passed anyway. And I think that was the SIS Ops or the SA. I can't remember, associate one. And then I did the other one of those two not long after that. But I also got offered. I got an invite from AWS to do the DevOps beta professional, so the DevOps professional. So while I was in beta, so if you have a look, I think you've got it up there on the screen at the moment. Sorry, it's not popping up for me. That I'm number 99 for the DevOps professional. So I was in the first group, and it was actually I think I'd only done those associates in that same year, um, and and so the ordering was all kind of skewed with them. But the worst thing about doing that Peter exam was you had so little information. So there was nothing published from AWS. There was nothing, no courses or anything had any information about it, and you kind of went in cold. You had the same amount of time, but you had twice as many questions. And the worst thing was you didn't know whether you passed for 3 months. So it was
Oh,
like you walked out of there and you're like, you've got to wait now until they collate all the results and go through everything and kind of go, okay, now you can pass. And so so I did that in December, and I think in February I got the results, and I was like, yay, I passed. I've been waiting for this day forever. So then last year at reInvent, I think I did the developer um, what do you call it, developer associate. I did that pretty much cold. Walked in and just jumped in and did it. I thought at that time I was pretty reasonably proficient enough, given that I'd done the DevOps professional and the SA and SysOps associate. And then I think once I got back from reInvent, I said, okay, I should probably find all the gaps that are left in my understanding and do the SA professional as well. So yeah, they were kind of a little bit out of order, but that's how it went.
yeah. Well, it sounds like that's the order that's suited, and having a sysadmin background, that's probably quite a good takeaway. Actually, is that if you feel more comfortable, with day-to-day operations, sysad or DevOps, then perhaps it's better to choose sysadmin first, and then look at doing the DevOps professional, and then do the architecture professional. Did you so how much time is that, Greg? What are we talking about? Is that over 6 months or 2 months, or how long did this all take?
Well, I think my first associated certification has just expired or is about to expire. So that's 2 years ago that I did that one, and my DevOps I have to renew it by December this year. My DevOps professional, um, and I finished the essay in the essay professional in November, December last year. So yeah, so what's that? That's about 18 months, I guess. I guess I did it over about a course of 18 months.
Wow, that's quite an achievement to be part of that beta program. That would be very, very exciting. And I guess you do enter a quite elite group, don't you, when you do get all five? I'm not sure offhand of the exact number there are worldwide, but it's pretty finite. And I heard you get a T-shirt if you get all five. Is that right? Did you get one?
You too. I've got a T-shirt. I've got lots of T-shirts. In fact, I think I went to reInvent. We got T-shirts there, and we got badges there, and then we went to I was at the Sydney Summit, and we got more T-shirts and more badges for having certifications. Yeah, I think even this week, actually, you'll find that at Werner Vogel's in Sydney, and there's actually I think on tomorrow night. So not just for all five, I think it's for anyone with certifications. There's actually a certification appreciation dinner on or something like that.
Yeah, they look after you well, don't they? And
They do.
joining
They
that,
do.
yeah, joining that elite club, I think everyone on the call is, it's well worth going after it, perhaps just for that. But 18 months, that's a fairly large time slice. But it sounds like that is the reality of, wanting to get from 0 to 5 certs. So there's probably no point in rushing these, right, Greg? I mean, did you ever fail any? Did you manage to pass all?
No, no, I passed all first time. I could tell you that I was, yeah, like I said with the DevOps one, I was very anxious to get those results because you had nothing going in, and it was like so what you weren't really sure what to study, and you had to do all of the you had more questions than the real exam, so you had to really burn through you burned through all the time. I finished with nothing left to spare. I literally was doing the last question in the last minute in that one. Um, and I don't so I don't know what they're doing in the background, but they also had so what you wouldn't have seen if you haven't done a beta is that they also have another box at the bottom, and they want feedback. And I made the mistake at the beginning of the exam to start putting feedback on other questions. And I soon realized that this is not going to work. I am never going to get through all the questions if I put feedback on it. And what I actually started to do, and I found out afterwards when I was talking to some of the other people who were on the beta, I just started putting an X in the box, or a character or something, just to say this probably needs some review, um, to kind of get through. And it's amazing. Other people had done that as well. I thought that was quite interesting. Um, I think um, the biggest problem getting them done in a short in with everything else. And as you're right, I wouldn't rush them, but I would probably have done them in maybe a slightly different order. I don't know. It kind of depends on what you're interested in. Um, and the weird thing is that you say I have 5 certificates, but I ultimately technically don't anymore because one's just lapsed. But once you've got the professionals, you don't need to have the associates anymore. So
Yeah, I think it's that jump up to the professional level that's, a big interest point for people. And so if you had, for example, a associate solution architect now, what would you recommend the first thing people should do to get, in the groove for passing or studying for the professional tier?
yeah, sure. So if you've only got one of the associates, I would definitely recommend doing a second one. So if you've done the developer associate, then look at doing the SIS Ops one. I would almost say yeah, you should partner the SIS Ops with one of the other two. So always do this. I would almost always recommend doing the SIS Ops first, unless you've got a little bit more of a slant on the developer side, and then maybe do the developer one first. But definitely pair either the SA or the developer with the sysops. So do those two first. I'm not sure if that's what AWS recommend or if they just require you to have one associate. I can't remember, but definitely do the sysops with one of the other two. And then from there, the kind of track becomes reasonably obvious, right? So if you're going to you do the sysop and the developer, you would go on and do the DevOps professional, or if you've done the the sysops and the SA associates, then go on to do the SA professional. The biggest thing that I would recommend is grab down the blueprint and kind of almost set yourself aside, in your life, 2 hours a week, 2 to 3 hours a week of time where you can close off everything. So don't try and do it in the middle of the business week because you'll end up with customer problem or some other issue at work or people asking you questions or something like that. Kind of find your time when it suits you to just lock everything away and pick one section, and then go off and read the white paper about it, or go and do a lab and then do some questions. I think the big thing to do is to first go and play with it yourself, right? So follow the kind of examples from the AWS documentation, and then then go and jump into a course or a lab or something from Cloud Academy or someone like that, and then kind of go through those processes, because they will help you fill in the blanks, if you like, the things that you didn't pick up during the examples, and then just do a section, and not long. If you break it down like that, a few weeks later you'll go through all the sections, and now you've learned it. You've learned all of those bits and pieces, right? Yeah. So that's kind of the approach that I've always taken.
That sounds very organised, Greg. That's that's a good time slice each week, and I would agree with you. I think that's really the only way that you're going to get through all this content is you just have to make time to do it, and the more corners you cut, the more you'll be pulling your hair out in that 80-minute session, wishing you had a bit more exposure to EBS or a bit more knowledge on virtual on the VPC. So that's
Yeah.
very good. That's a good insight. And did you find you did the same kind of learning for every exam, or did you customize it for each one?
Yeah. So I think for the developer one, I said I went in cold at reInvent. Well, that's only mildly true. I knew I had a little bit of a gap in DynamoDB. Everyone said, "Oh, you've got to know DynamoDB. You've got to know DynamoDB." So I really sat down and just did all the maths on how to calculate the DynamoDB number of IOPS you need and all that sort of thing. And I did that the night before. So I broke my rules there. Um, but everything else with developer, I was pretty comfortable with. I was like, I didn't do any learning for that one. And the DevOps beta, like that one there wasn't really a lot of learning for that one, because I was like, I don't know what to do, because there wasn't a lot of information at all, right? So definitely when I did the SIS Ops originally and the SA Associate and the Professional Associate, I did something along those lines. I'd been doing AWS for a number of years when I did the first Associate, and then it was like, okay, I need something that's a little bit more structured. I'm going to grab that blueprint, and I'm going to go and find the resources in AWS. I'm going to have a play with them myself, build up a VPZ and all these types of things, and then I'm going to go and do a course and some labs, and make sure that I fill in the gaps. Something, for example, like something as simple as back in those days, there was only two types of EBS storage, magnetic and IOPS, and you generally didn't use IOPS, right? Because you're just playing around. So you've done a lot of magnetic, but you've never done any calculations on how does IOPS work, how would you size it. But there's a couple of questions that kind of pop up about how many there is you can have and those sort of things. And so if you don't touch it, and the blueprint probably just says EBS. It doesn't actually go and it says you need to know EBS and IOPS. But the courses fill those gaps in for you, right? They'll make sure that you've covered off both magnetic and IOPS in this case type thing. And that's where you have your play and you do your kind of solve your problems in the console yourself or via the command line, but within AWS. And then get those courses to just fill in all the little bits and pieces that you haven't thought of specifically, to help to fill in all those gaps for you.
Yeah, I'm hearing that loud and clear, and just having built the latest learning path for our solution architect professional courses, yeah, I fully concur on that. Just the detail on how to, especially around IOPS, it's that little extra detail that perhaps you don't get into in your day-to-day routines, and just having something to help you dig a bit deeper. The labs are also great for that, aren't they? Like just having the opportunity to spin things up and test out your thinking about how you solve problems. Did
Yeah,
you find
definitely.
yourself? Yeah. Did you like do a lot of? I had a couple of questions about whether you did all the certifications at your same role and things like that, which I just think is probably a little bit outside the realm of our talk today. But it would be generally interesting to know, did you find that the business was interested in having you get to that 5 as well? Was it just a personal one that drove you forward?
A bit of both. We needed to have like, um, so, in the day. And then it was like, to get the next MSP competency, we needed to have a number of professional certifications. So we had enough, and I didn't need to do it, but it was definitely, worthwhile, and they were interested in having me, complete all of them. So it was a little bit of both, yeah.
Yeah, hear all that, everybody. That's definitely a motivator. If you're looking at getting a new job or starting somewhere, then having all 5 is going to be quite a good draw card. And for the partner community, it is an important thing to make sure that you're compliant with the requirements each year. All right, so that's very interesting. We've got a few questions in here, Greg. I'm wondering. I've got to ask you one myself, though. I've already asked you about the T-shirt. It's good to clarify that. But did you have,
you get lots of swag. You've got certificates. You get lots of swag. I have lots of T-shirts.
Yeah, that's a good incentive. And did you have an exam that you found the hardest and the one that you liked the most?
So the one that I liked the most is probably also the one that I found the hardest, and it's the DevOps beta. Doing that one really pushed you. You had to do so many more questions, and it's not often that I'm in a position where I'm finishing the last question in the last minute of the exam, time, and so you had no time to worry. Right? If you get through and you've got 30 minutes left or something like that, and then you start to think, you start to double guess yourself and all this sort of thing on the questions you've done, and you're like, you had no time for that. It was like, I'm doing, bang, and going in cold, with no understanding of what might be in the exam, or very little understanding. It really is the one that's going to kind of stand out for you. I have no idea how many questions they threw out. Like, I assume there was some magic that they applied. So maybe today, if I took it again, I might fail. I don't know.
That would be so much fun. I'd love to do that one. That would be, and you've done so many. Do you have any sort of tips for exam day? Like, as you said, you're running out of time constantly. Do you save things and go back and check them later, or do you just use that go through, answer, move on?
I do, but I tend to stick with my original question. Like, I can't quote specific studies, but I've read enough things that say that most of the time you've usually picked the right answer the first time, so don't change it. So while I do tag things to review later, I very rarely change them to review. And try and not get myself too worked up about it, right, at the end, because you are, if you have that little bit of time, you kind of start to double guess yourself on some of these questions. It can be particularly interesting. The answers, there's usually, right, so there are the exams are for what do you call it, a multi-choice type approach, and there's usually 4 answers, and 2 of them are throwaway. And then the other 2 answers are going to be very similar, and there'll be one little thing in there that you have to pick out from the question to distinguish which one is the right one. And those are the ones that you get hung up on, and you put a mark down and come back to it later, and you start to double guess yourself, and you start to overthink it, and just, yeah. The thing is, go with your gut. It's usually right. But for preparation, what I generally do is try not to do any study the night before. If you haven't studied up to that point in time, you're probably not going to learn it and retain it. It's I would say, sadly, it's probably a little bit too late. Go to bed early, but don't change from your normal routine, if you like. Get up, have a good breakfast, blah, blah, blah. Probably don't drink the coffee. Don't drink the coffee that morning. And my one thing that I did for all of the exams, I took a banana and ate it just before I went in, so I had some sustenance.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I can remember getting quite hungry in the 3-hour one, so that's a good tip. And the caffeine one, there's always a panic, isn't there? Just before you go in, you think, oh, I need to take 4 cups of coffee, and that last sort of panicking preparation. That's good advice. Sage words there to try and do your preparation before the night before. A couple of questions here actually is I've got one person asking just about the crossover between the DevOps and the SIS Ops content. And I think we've covered that already, but did you have any other insight on that one, Greg?
So, sorry, is it the sysops and the developer, or the
Yeah, no,
sysops
no,
associate and the
SysOps
DevOps?
and DevOps. Yeah,
Yeah, okay. Um, so I guess the all of the associates are very are more focused on kind of just the specific resources and kind of how they work and their limits and those sort of things in AWS, more so than when you get into the developer and the architecture professionals. They are very much more focused on the how to build it for the architecture and sorry, how to build it for the DevOps and what to build for the architecture type of thing. And the paragraph um, talking about a resource or a little situation in the associate now becomes 5 paragraphs of thick content. And so it's more a very it's more a situation with quite a lot of inputs and moving parts, and the answers now become a paragraph as opposed to a sentence. And so it's really sitting there and picking between those. So going back, sorry, to the actual question was how much of is there overlap? Well, there's not so much an overlap, but when you get to that professional level, you've got to have an understanding of those basic resources, and those basic resources are those ones covered in the associate exams, right? So that's where the overlap comes from in that respect.
yeah, okay. Yeah. Now, I've got another one here, Greg. Someone who's a student interested in moving out into the job market and just wondering, that the certifications are an absolute requirement, but often they're coming up against candidates who have more experience. Is there anything they could do to increase their experience as well?
Yeah, so with AWS, of course, you get the free tier. So sign up yourself and jump in there and do things. Um, the types of things that I did when I was a student was um, it's almost a little bit as much about networking, right? So who can you find in your network who solve that problem for them? And now you've immediately got a reference and some experience. It might only be a couple of hours of work. Um, jump onto an open source project and help them with their infrastructure, for example, or Linux user groups is another good one, right? You're going to get if they have and you'll often find people in those groups who will need assistance with setting up infrastructure or maintaining it or those sort of things. You're going to get experience, and you're going to build your network outside of uni or school or whatever it is that you're in. And that's going to be really valuable to getting your experience, getting your references, and building up your network to get those job offers.
Well, that's good advice. Yeah, the networking part, especially that there's plenty of networks out there, and the more time you spend in those situations, the more you learn. The interesting question here, Greg. Do you think you need Bash scripting or Python experience to get started with any of the certs?
You need to have a understanding of a language other than Bash, so Python or Ruby or what are some of the others? Basically, most of the ones that are covered in the AWS SDKs. But you don't need to know one specifically for the exams. The questions are kind of general development type questions as opposed to a specific language. The things that you will need to know in that respect, and most of the SDKs follow, well, no, I think they all follow. I don't know off the top of my head because I don't use all of them. The same naming conventions for methods, right, and classes. So there are a few in, I think, in the developer exam and maybe in the SIS Ops exam. I can't remember specifically, where you do need to kind of have an understanding of the language that AWS SDK uses, for the method call. So if you kind of get where a verb versus a noun goes in their methodology, you should be able to pick out the right ones. But those are all language agnostic. So you don't need to know a specific language, but definitely you need to know something more than Bash. I would say that you kind of, at least at a minimum, learn and use the AWS CLI as you're doing labs. So if you do a lab really quickly in the console, jump in and do it via the CLI. If you kind of want to go that next level, then I'd definitely use another language like Python or Ruby to do the same thing again. It all ultimately matches, right? So the same calls that you do, the same function that you used in the AWS CLI is going to be exactly the same name. Maybe the capitalization or underscores are a little bit different, but the same names in the same places are followed exactly the same in the SDK. So it becomes really easy. And I actually do that all the time. I will prototype something, talking to the AWS API using the CLI first, and then go off and write it in Python or Ruby. And that's how I write a lot of the Lambda stuff I do, like that. So I do a quick one on the AWS CLI just by copying and pasting values as I print them out. And then once I kind of understand my workflow, what I want to achieve, I'll then go and write my first iteration in Python to run locally. And then the next iteration is to wrap it in something that's suitable for a Lambda with a handler and return values for the context, etc.
That is great. That is, I think everyone would like to be doing that. That's very insightful, Greg. I mean, thank you very much for sort of sharing with us your experiences here, and I'm sure everyone's taken away some excitement from the sort of plan you've outlined there, that this is achievable, and that you put some time and effort in, and you can have those 5 certifications like Greg does, and that's something to be aiming for. That's going to get you a lot of credibility in the market and get you started on your career.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
yeah. So thank you very much, Greg. I want to say thanks again for your time today. If you have any questions following this session, please email us at support@cloudacademy.com, and where we can, we'll try and help you with the answer. If it's something that is something I like to ask Greg directly, then I'll forward those to him. We'll publish the webinar online shortly, and we will just say again, thank you, Greg. Thanks very much. This has been a good session for us all. Signing off, this is Andrew Larkin from Cloud Academy. See you all again next time.